On January 12th, 2022, a man was roaming Perth streets out for blood. He was on a gruesome crusade of retribution after taking meth. The man, a convicted drug dealer, approached a home in Landsdale, Perth. Looking for a quick kill, he pointed his shotgun at the bedroom window and pulled the trigger. So far, it sounds like any other killing made in the web-like networks of the illicit drug trade, only the man in the bedroom, the man who took the shotgun blast and ultimately lost his life, was not the target. This was a tragic case of mistaken identity. But who were these men, and how did this needless loss of life occur? The victim was Ralph Matthews-Cox. He was a 47-year-old father to 2 daughters and 2 stepsons, and is remembered by his family as a loving son, partner, and dedicated parent. He had recently moved to Perth to start a new life, working as a fly-in, fly-out worker in the resources industry, flying into sites across the country, then flying out to return home when his shift was complete, a few days or weeks later. The biggest thing most people remember about Ralph was his devotion to his partner and her children. By all accounts, Ralph had absolutely no ties to drugs, gangs or violence. He was simply a humble and kind ordinary man. On the night of the murder, Ralph was at home in Landsdale, asleep in his bedroom. It wasn't a sketchy place, it was perfectly safe, or it should have been. On that night, it would become the scene of his murder. His family and police later stressed he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was the victim of a case of mistaken identity that broke the hearts of those who loved him. Peter Nguyen-Ha, on the other hand, was the man on a drug-fueled rampage. He was 35 at the time of the incident. He was already a convicted meth dealer with a well-documented record of violence and a known member of Perth's criminal underworld. The contrast between these 2 men could not be more striking. One is completely innocent, and one is a true criminal in every sense. Still, Nguyen-Ha had no intention of killing an innocent man. He thought he was killing someone who had scammed him out of money. Sadly, that person wasn't where Nguyen-Ha expected him to be, and Ralph was in his place. It had all been building up for several weeks, and there was a tenuous link between these 2 men. That connection was Anthony Pryor, the nephew of Ralph Matthews-Cox's partner. Pryor was the target of Nguyen-Ha's shotgun blast. Nguyen-Ha was in a state of intense rage and paranoia, and set out on what prosecutors later labelled a meth-fuelled crusade of retribution. It all started when a drug deal with Anthony Pryor went wrong. The arrangement was supposed to take place at an industrial unit in Landsdale, but instead of handing over the money and receiving the drugs as agreed, Nguyen-Ha was beaten and robbed, losing tens of thousands of dollars in the process. Needless to say, he was furious and felt completely betrayed. He went and recruited Matthew Gempton, known locally as Reliable Muscle. The pair started hunting for Pryor, desperate to find him, the stolen money, and to get revenge. In the days before the murder, Nguyen-Ha and Gempton terrorised several Perth suburbs with an escalating series of violent incidents. They targeted houses in Girraween and Wanneroo, where they thought Pryor might be hiding, firing shots at residences in the early hours of the morning. They didn't seem to care if anyone was caught in the crossfire, and a large number of lives were put at risk as they carried out repeated drive-by attacks in those neighbourhoods. Joondalup hospital records show that Peter even sought treatment for injuries he himself picked up while carrying out these crimes. Clearly, he was eager to get patched up and get back out on the streets. The vendetta was consuming him. Eventually, the Landsdale home Ralph was staying at became the next target. They knew Pryor occasionally stayed at the property, so they decided it was time to visit the house. They chose the night of January 12th, 2022, when Ralph was asleep beside his partner, Tammy Wallace. The power to the house was deliberately cut as Nguyen-Ha and Gempton moved in, hoping to catch Anthony Pryor off guard and in a state of confusion. Moments before the attack, Tammy was woken by unusual noises and glimpsed a masked man outside their bedroom window. She screamed for Ralph, who instinctively got up and approached the window. What followed was a terrifying sequence. One shotgun blast, described as an explosion, then another quick shot. Tammy witnessed Ralph clutch his shoulder, telling her he'd been hit as chaos broke out. She tried desperately to pull him to the ground for safety, then ran to secure her children and call for help. Tragically, Ralph collapsed in the hallway and died soon after being rushed to the hospital. Police swiftly responded to the shooting. On arrival, officers collected evidence that quickly linked Peter Nguyen-Ha and Matthew Gempton to the crime. The investigation went deeper, uncovering that Nguyen-Ha and Gempton had also been involved in the series of drive-by shootings reported in the nearby suburbs of Girraween and Wanneroo. These different events were linked by ballistics and witness reports, as it became clear these two men had been on a bloody rampage for several weeks. Forensic evidence was vital in piecing together the case, including the gunshot residue, shell casings and digital footprints, including mobile data. Witness testimonies further confirmed the timeline and movements of Nguyen-Ha and Gempton. The police mapped out a chain of escalating violence fueled by drug disputes and personal vendettas. Shortly after the murder of Ralph Matthews-Cox, Nguyen-Ha was taken into custody to face charges of murder and other related offences. Nguyen-Ha's arrest led to a high-profile 7-week trial in the WA Supreme Court starting in June 2025. Throughout the trial, Nguyen-Ha strongly denied firing the fatal shot, claiming instead that he had only fired 2 non-lethal salt-filled cartridges and that he only intended to scare the intended target of the attack. Matthew Gempton testified that he did not fire any weapon on the night of the shooting before later pleading guilty to manslaughter related to the incident. Despite these claims, the prosecution built a strong case, arguing that both men worked together with a common purpose and that Nguyen-Ha was fully responsible for Ralph's death. The intended target of the shooting, Anthony Pryor, admitted in court that he had set up Nguyen-Ha and stolen tens of thousands of dollars from him by offering up fake drugs in late 2021, the moment that started Nguyen-Ha's rampage. After careful deliberation, the jury found Nguyen-Ha guilty on all 6 charges, including 1 count of murder and 5 counts of acts with intent to harm or endanger life across multiple northern Perth suburbs. The courtroom was charged with emotion as Ralph's mother, Michelle Nelson Cox, broke down, describing the loss as the worst injustice a mother can endure. She expressed heartache over never seeing her son again and highlighted that he was guilty of nothing, that he was a kind, generous and innocent man caught up in a case of mistaken identity. Peter Nguyen-Ha is waiting to be sentenced, facing the possibility of life imprisonment. The verdict did bring some closure to a devastated family. Finally, they can mourn the death of their loved one, knowing justice has been served. It can sometimes be hard to separate those lives lost in drug-related violence from the idea of criminal on criminal violence. However, this case is a reminder that innocent lives are often caught up in this violent world. Whether it's someone caught in the crossfire or, like in this instance, someone being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being mistaken for a target, countless lives are lost each year completely unnecessarily due to the illegal acts of hardened criminals. The loss of Ralph Matthews-Cox, a completely innocent man with a clear record, is the perfect reminder of how drug-related violence and mistaken identity can devastate innocent lives. This was a loving father and partner with no ties to crime, shot in his own home, a place he should have been perfectly safe in. As for the perpetrators, they are set to serve time for their crimes, although Matthew Gempton accepted a reduced sentence for manslaughter for appearing as a key witness in the murder case. Peter Nguyen-Ha was sentenced to at least 22 years jail, with the judge calling it a callous act of unbridled thuggery. For now, this brings us to the end of the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. As always, if you've enjoyed this video and want more stories from the Australian underworld, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. Till next time, take care.